But what I want to do in my brief introductory remarks is simply state that there's a lot of very detailed, complex stuff in this OECD BEPS project. BEPS stands for base erosion and profit shifting. But ultimately, all you really need to understand is that we have a very bad tax system. And so to the extent that U.S. lawmakers are concerned that we might somehow be losing corporate tax revenue from the United States, there are two reasons why that could be happening. First, we're one of the few countries in the world with a worldwide tax system. And what worldwide tax means is that we don't just tax the income that U.S. taxpayers earn inside the United States. We also are very unusual in the world in that we also try to tax or impose taxes on the income that's earned in other jurisdictions. But of course, other jurisdictions already tax that income. And so having a worldwide tax system, in effect, is a form of double taxation. In theory, you get a credit for the taxes you pay to other jurisdictions. But then this brings up the second problem that we have. This is a chart showing the U.S. corporate tax rate and the average corporate tax rate in other developed nations around the world. We have the highest corporate tax rate, not just of any developed country, but of any country, period. Sometimes people say, no, it's higher in the United Arab Emirates. But no, that's only a severance tax on oil companies. It's not a generalized corporate income tax. So among all countries in the world, we have the highest corporate income tax, and we have a worldwide tax system that unambiguously is the most onerous in the world. So of course, if you're a U.S. multinational trying to compete in global markets, you have every possible incentive to have as much of your economic activity outside the U.S. and to defer any repatriation of profits to America. So to the extent that there actually is a concern that somehow corporate tax revenues aren't flowing into the Treasury, and I confess that I never lose a moment's sleep about the thought that the Treasury's not collecting enough money, but if you are one of those people who's worried about that, then we should fix the two very big warts that we have in our corporate tax system. Lower the corporate tax rate and follow the rest of the world in shifting to territorial taxation instead of worldwide taxation, and these problems, to the extent that they even exist, will disappear. But that's the U.S. perspective. What's wrong with the American tax system? Now let's sort of wed this to the OECD's base erosion and profit shifting, because of course the OECD's BEPS project is in effect the same concerns that U.S. lawmakers have. Oh, we're not collecting enough money because somehow multinationals might be moving income elsewhere, and it applies it to the entire world. Well, let's look at a chart. This is not a very clear chart, but it shows corporate tax revenues as a share of GDP over like the last 6 years, and it looks like, oh my God, there's a crisis. Governments aren't collecting nearly as much corporate tax revenue as maybe they should. Well, this is a chart from the OECD website. It's looking at the last 6 years. What if we look at the last several decades? All of a sudden, the picture's a lot different. There's a trend of corporate tax revenues as a share of GDP going up in OECD countries. So the notion that there's somehow some big erosion of corporate tax receipts in OECD nations, there's no factual basis for it. And so here's really the bottom line, and this is all I really need to say and all you really need to understand, although the other three speakers are going to say things that are worth listening to as well. The OECD BEPS project is nothing but an effort by an international bureaucracy representing high-tax governments to figure out how they can extract more money from the business community. They want to extract more money from the business community on a worldwide basis, but you'll hear from our other speakers, this will have especially negative effects on U.S. competitiveness and U.S. multinationals. So with that, let me turn it over to David Burton.